Not that key. How about this one? No.
Yeah, you probably have to click it.
Oh, click. Oh, that means that I also need my glasses. Okay. There we go. Okay. So I just use the mouse to click. And where do I click? Oh, okay. Great. Okay. So first, let me see a little bit about my school at MIT. So we have, in effect, 11 faculty housing departments in the School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences. They're not all called departments. So we have 2 performing arts units, music and theater arts, 4 in the humanities. 1 is comparative media studies and writing. We also have linguistics, literature, and philosophy. Then 3 humanistic social sciences, anthropology, history, and science, technology, and society, and 2 social sciences, economics, and political science. So those all have faculty. And then in addition, we have a bunch of units which are not faculty housing, but some are fairly substantial. So I thought I'd list 4 here. Global languages, which teaches non-English languages, our Women and Gender Studies program, something called the Jamil Poverty Action Lab, which is it's part of the economics department, and it uses RTCs to study poverty alleviation programs. And we have a Center for International Studies. So it's a fairly large school. We have about 180 tenure stream faculty and that many lecturers. And one thing to know about MIT, which is not obvious, is that we have a very substantial undergraduate requirement in the humanities, arts, and social sciences. So if you want to graduate from MIT, you need to take 8 classes in this. Well, almost all of them are in the school. Strictly, they need to be 8 in the humanities, arts, and social sciences. Some other schools offer them, but almost all are offered in this school. And then on top of that, there are distribution and depth requirements. So it's a big part of the undergraduate experience. Okay, so you have the vision statement there behind me. The 2 key things to emphasize is that Mythic is meant to elevate human-centered thinking on its own for its own sake, but also to make it easier and more effective to collaborate if you're on my side of MIT with the rest of MIT. And a lot of the rest of MIT is STEM. So in practice, that means a lot of collaboration between humanists, artists, social scientists, and people in STEM. So let me tell you what this consists in. So it really has 3 parts, 3 pillars, we call them. So there's a pillar which we call the foundation. And you can think of that as creating infrastructure for the rest of the operation. So there are a number of community programs to, bring people to Mythic. There is some staffing. We have some physical space. We have something called the Europe program, which I suspect is similar to your VIP program in some ways. So Europe stands for Undergraduate Research Opportunity. And so what that means is that sometimes for free, sometimes MIT provides funds for undergrads to become part of someone's research effort, and it's very, very popular. So as part of Mythic, you might get assigned Europe's. The second pillar, and that really is the biggest part of it, is 3 big pots of money. So there's a pot of money, which is the SHAS Plus Connectivity Fund, and that's $2 million a year. And that money is for collaborations between someone in my school and someone from a different school at MIT. Then there's something called the Humanities Cultivation Fund, which is for projects specifically in the humanities or specifically in the arts. And then there's the Education Fund, which is to support not so much new classes, but new approaches to pedagogy. And then the final thing, which I'll say more about later, is that Mythic supports faculty-driven initiatives. Say a little bit more about that. Okay, so here is the leadership team. And the main thing I want to draw your attention to is the upper left box. I'm there, yes, but so is Anantha Chandrakrasan, who is MIT's Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer, but also the Dean of Engineering. And that is the key to the success of the program. So this is not something that I set up. This is something that I set up in close collaboration and with full enthusiasm from MIT's Dean of Engineering. And I think that the reason that's been so important is, firstly, that as a result of this collaboration, this is not a School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences thing. This is an MIT thing. It is officially a presidential priority, and the president has been very supportive. But because of Anantha's participation, this has really been woven into the fabric of MIT, including things like doing a lot to encourage the engineers to take this seriously and apply for funds and collaborate. And so, that has really been crucial. Another reason it's been crucial is because engineering is where the money is. So, I operate on a fairly meager budget, and I could have never done something at that scale. But forging a coalition with the other side of the institute really allowed us to do things at a scale that we could not have, that I certainly could not have imagined. And it also means that the result is not the Humanities Center that some of my faculty were dreaming about. So, what we tried to do is set up the collaboration fund, which is where the money is. That's where people from other parts of MIT are interested in investing, and most philanthropists, not all, but most. But to leave some space, some protected space for people who just do humanities core. And I think that, reaching that compromise, finding a version of that everyone was happy with was what was key to the success. All right, so just so you get a sense of what each of the funds is like. So for the Connectivity Fund, which again is the bridge, we got 47 proposals with 6.7 million in requested direct costs. We couldn't fund them all because we only had 2 million for both direct and indirect costs. And that chart shows you where from MIT the proposals come from. So blue is School of Engineering. That's where we got the most proposals, followed by light blue, which is School of Architecture and Planning. And one thing that was really crucial to get strong applications is that there was a very strong effort to do matchmaking before the call for proposals went out. So there's a mythic faculty lead who did many things, including this meeting of the minds program, where he actively reached out to departments across MIT to figure out who was interested in collaborating, and then actively worked with deans and department heads to see if there were, oh my God, okay, to see if there were potential collaborators and brought them together. Okay, so let me end by saying a little bit about faculty-driven initiatives. So here the idea is that we have already at MIT groups of faculty who are doing interesting things, and we wanted them to be part of this effort, and we wanted them to be part of the excitement. So Mythic is also an umbrella for some of these groups, and we have some money set aside so that we can create a runway for these groups to eventually get outside funds. So when this slide was made, we're hoping to award $500K to one faculty-driven initiative. I think that we're going to be able to support 3. And this is not permanent support. This is support for a few years so they get started and eventually become independent.
Thank you. That was super. Oh, super interesting. Yeah, that's different. I'm going to have a lot of the same themes, but before I start, I wanted to thank John and thank the Institute for bringing this together and making this happen. I think this is super important, and the more we do it, the better. For me personally, I got a great win here because today turns out to be Carnival at Carnegie Mellon. And there's been a tradition where the deans get dunked to support the Special Olympics, which has been great fun, but not on a cold, rainy day. So I was signed up for this, and when people said, "Oh, you can't miss the dunking," I said, "This is very important. I have to." So thank you. So my college, Humanities and Social Sciences, is similar to the one you just heard about. It's got a slightly different makeup of departments. We have neuroscience, we have psychology, we have statistics and data science, which is a little bit odd. And we have humanities departments in philosophy, history, English, modern languages. And then we have a social and decision sciences department, which is behavioral economics, judgment and decision, things like that, an international relations department. We don't have economics, but it's quite similar to what you just heard. So from the very beginning of my deanship, it's been the challenge of how do I make humanities thrive in a technical university, which is known for computer science, engineering, drama, but that's not my college. But we have super good people in humanities, and we have super interesting programs. And so the challenge has been, right, how do we get this to really thrive? And I think what we've come to, and I'll describe many more small scale efforts, but they're in a similar boat, has been to essentially find a way to get the humanities to be valued so that people actually want to be at the table, both in research and in education. And that's been sort of the premise for me from the beginning, and I'll get more into that as we go. But the basic phenomena that I think we're seeing, and I'm curious about others, is that as MIT does, we also have other colleges require people to take courses in humanities and social sciences. So in the courses we offer in humanities, the enrollments are very good and have been very good for quite a long time, right? People take modern languages, they take philosophy, they take literature courses. So that's not been a problem, and having enrollments mostly in lower level courses has been strong for a long time. The problem is in getting people to major. in these subjects, right? Getting people to both come to Carnegie Mellon who are interested in studying humanities and to major in these fields so we have enough students at the advanced level to offer courses that are more than the superficial, not superficial, but introductory level courses. And so the problem we've been trying to solve is, right, how do we get interest from the outside? How do people find out about, right, what Carnegie Mellon does? How do we get the faculty all over the university to be involved, et cetera, et cetera? And just to give you a sense of the scale of the problem, in the year 2000, even though we have a great statistics and data science department, 6 students graduated with a major in statistics in the year 2000. This last year, across the university, there are 600 majors in statistics and data science. So it would be very easy to convert my college to a college of statistics and information systems. I forgot to mention that. So getting a balance where there's enough students who are interested in, right, what I'm calling the more technical side of the college, but also enough students who are interested in humanities is really a complicated challenge, but it's one we've been sort of going after for a long time. The premise that I've been working with, and I think that we really have to accept, and I really hear this in MIT, is that the people on all sides of the university, not just humanities, but also social scientists, like computer scientists, engineers, regular scientists, have to really value the humanities in a way that's, I think, much more than just we want the students to take gen ed courses in the humanities. So what we've done is a number of different programs to encourage that. And let me just share a few with you and then pass the mic on. So the first thing we did, which is I think similar to what you've just heard, is a program that's for first year students, and it's called the Grand Challenge Seminars. Instead of having students come in and take a course in English or in French or in physics or whatever, we set up topics that are grand challenges to society. And then we actually assign multiple professors, at least one from the social sciences, at least one from humanities, and possibly one from STEM, right, to co-teach this course. So we've done climate change, we've done racism, we've done food security, right? We've done misinformation and data.
Wait, so it's one course?
One course, right, co-taught by several professors. And the idea is it's on a single topic. And so the example I want to give that sort of touches also on themes we heard this morning was we did a course on climate change. And we had an engineer on atmospheric chemistry, right, who taught the basic science of climate change, greenhouse gases. We had a person from English who was in rhetoric. And we had a politician, right, who wasn't actually on the faculty, but had negotiated the climate change accords in Paris for Poland, right? So they could tell you how the sausage was made. Well, after 2 weeks, the students were incredibly clear that the science is kind of, good, but not exciting and interesting as it's settled. The rhetoric is where it's really going on. And when you saw how the information from the scientists gets to the press and then it gets to the political parties left and right, and the moves that happen rhetorically, their eyes really opened up. And then when you see how the politics works and how important all those discussions are, they could see that the action, right, was really the humanities and social sciences side much more intensely than it was in the science side. Right? So that was really important, I think, to show how humanities can really help. The other things that I want to point out is that we've really now started to lean into, it's not just called digital humanities anymore, it's more computational humanities. There are so many people on the computational side of campus that are tool builders or methods builders, but don't have interesting problems to apply them to. So what we've done is pair up with seed grants of the sort you're talking about, the people in computer science, people in data science, people in other places that have developed techniques, algorithms, methods, but are looking for interesting problems to apply them to. So a really good example is one person was working on computer vision, machine learning, character recognition, and one person in English was doing Shakespearean 16th, 17th century literature and was interested in John Milton's Areopagitica, which was the first pamphlet to really come out and say freedom of the press, freedom of speech is a crucial right we have to guarantee. Well, when he published the pamphlet, he didn't reveal the identity of the printer, because Parliament would have shut down the printing house immediately and it would have gone extinct. And so it wasn't known who actually printed that pamphlet until about 3 years ago, right? When they took all these known pamphlets from known printers in London from 1644, right, and applied machine vision to the characters and recognized that some of the pamphlets, right, had some of the typeset characters that were starting to break and decay. And you could recognize from that and the characters in Aeropagitica that it was Thomas and Paine who printed the Aeropagitica. So, it was extremely exciting and fun and cool, and never could have been done without machine learning people. And the machine learning people are bragging about that before they're bragging about their cool machine vision techniques. Because, as you say, so it was just an example of how that collaboration could really work. So, in the educational side, I think again, right, getting programs set up so that students can see, right, that if they are interested in humanities, they're also going to have an exposure to computation, a little data, and that what they can bring to the table is invaluable, and the employers are going to recognize that as well. So we set up an internship program in the summer whereby students can get connected to local organizations in Pittsburgh. They're nonprofits, community service organizations, or even startups in the business world, right? And if the students in the humanities have just a little bit of computing and data, I mean, really a course, then they're easy to place. And when they go to these companies or these nonprofits, they're astonished, right, at the value of these students and what they bring to the table. So I've actually heard comments from some of the organizations like, wow, your students are great. They're better than the computer science students at Carnegie Mellon, which is like, that now I can die happy. What they mean is that for what they needed in their organization, the computing and the data was pretty minimal. They didn't have any skill in the area, but the students could think, they could write, they could communicate, they could construct a narrative, they could construct a story, and they could understand strategically what it is the organization was trying to do in this computing task, and then locate the work back to the organization's strategic goals. So they fully recognized the benefit of the humanistic study, right, in the students they were getting from us in the summer internship. And I still come back to the fact that that is the key to this. They have to recognize it's not just coding, it's not just statistics, it's not just science. They have to be able to communicate, to understand strategy, to understand narrative, how to do research, understand other people, have empathy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been super important for us. Another thing I'll just point to quickly educationally is a PhD program that's a certificate that's in between the machine learning department and the philosophy department in ethics and AI. And the basic idea came out of trying to hire faculty who could teach ethics and AI and discovering that there were lots of people who could do ethics but didn't really know anything about the technology in any depth. And there were a bunch of people who knew the technology but really did not know the ethics in any depth. And so this program is meant to actually give people enough, right, of a set of skills and courses in each side. So when they go to teach or they go to work at factories, I mean, not factories, tech companies, that they will be credible, right, and can work on teams with either very sophisticated technologists or managers, et cetera. So that's just starting now, and that's hopefully going to be pretty significant. In terms of a humanities center, I'll just sort of wrap up and say there's lots of other programs like this, but I think you get the drift of where I'm going. It's very, very similar to where MIT is going. It's try to create opportunities for humanists, humanities, social sciences people to get together with computational people or STEM people or whatever, engineers, and be involved in projects in which it's obvious that they bring value to the table and that they're going to be wanted not just this year, but next year and the year after and the year after that. That's what seems to be the key thing. In the Humanities Center at Carnegie Mellon, which is very small, and used to be a much more traditional center in which we'd, invite speakers, we'd have events, food, lectures, et cetera, and very little in terms of sustained research would come out of it. That center has shifted now to one where we do offer seed grants in collaborative projects, but there's also fellowships that are granted to humanities faculty that are in the middle of research projects, so they can join a community of research and have other people to talk to, right, every week, who are in the same moment in time in that week coming together to work, to write, to talk, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's a very, very big shift, but I'm very excited about it because I think that the other thing that humanities does that I don't really understand is encourage or keep to a tradition in which people work totally solo, right? The idea is that the historian, right, goes to the archives by him or herself, comes out with no sun on their face for months and months, looking very, very pale and gaunt, and then publishes a monograph, right? As opposed to the sciences, which are traditionally organized to work in labs, where there's a faculty member who's getting the grants, there's postdocs, there's PhD students, there's undergraduates, and there's a community in which they come together at least weekly and talk to each other about the research. They branch off various projects. I don't see any reason why this could not also happen to some projects in the humanities. And I think it would be more fun. It would be more productive. We don't reward it. We don't have a system of a tenure promotion in which that's really rewarded. And I think we really should. Okay, so I will stop there. Many more to say, but again, I'm very grateful for you to put this together. And I look forward to talking with more of you as we go.
All right, great. I'm very curious about how you all have chosen to sit in this room with this whole big group on this side and this whole big group on this side and no one in the middle for me to look at, but it's very funny. Let me know if you can't hear me. As was stated, I am the director of the Hall Center for the Humanities at the University of Kansas. The Hall Center is one of 11 designated research centers on the KU campus, the only humanities center. And our mission is to foster and promote humanities research, and then research, traditional conventional research, but also creative production, and then disseminate that type of research to the larger campus and community. Whereas my colleagues to the right have talked about, as deans, maybe more of the educational mission. We don't have an educational focus per se at the Hall Center. That is taken care of by the College of Arts and Sciences, and our focus is really supposed to be on helping to foster research. And that is when the Hall Center started. We'll have our 50th anniversary in 2026. So when it started, it was really focused on faculty research. We've expanded that to graduate students, but primarily doctoral students for certain grants that we give, and that's an economic issue, and I can talk about that more later. And then, but also undergraduates. So I'll just talk a little bit about a few of those programs, and I'm looking forward to kind of answering questions and conversation afterward. So we have the resident research fellows. So currently we offer 6 faculty fellowships a year for 1 semester free of teaching and service, departmental service. So those faculty fellows get an office in the Hall Center, and it's really nice because our humanities building doesn't have very many windows, and it's very stark, brutalist architecture, and we have windows in the Hall Center, so people are excited to see sun. They're not quite so pale. And they get an office so they can focus on their project, and in this kind of community of others who are similarly engaged with this intensive kind of research project. And then they present on the project. We serve lunch. Folks from all over campus come. We advertise and promote. Folks from campus and the community, if they desire, come to listen, ask questions. And I think that kind of exchange is really great for interdisciplinary conversations, not just the conversations that those faculty fellows tend to have if they go to conferences that are specifically in their field. So someone in literature will get to hear from folks who come in history and art history and philosophy, or whoever comes. And graduate students get to come to those also, and it gives them a chance to kind of see how those presentations are handled and question and answer. And we do that for 6 faculty fellows and 2 doctoral students. So usually 3 fellows in the fall, 3 in the spring. Faculty, 1 graduate student each semester. We also offer research travel grants for research to different places and that travel cannot be for conferences. So again, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences has travel grants for conferences. We are trying to give our awards to students and faculty who need kind of extra money for more sustained research. So whereas I think when I go to a conference, I don't know why the Caribbean, I'm a Caribbeanist, the Caribbean is counted as domestic travel, which I think is not right. But it's now up to like, I think $1,000 for a conference. The Hall Center provides up to $3,000. So a student or a faculty member could technically go for a summer and stay and explore archives for a longer period of time. And we also have those travel grants for undergraduate students, although not quite as much money in that pot. We have the research collabs, which are our chance or kind of attempt to try to foster greater engagement, interdisciplinary engagement. So those applications, we ask that the collaborative teams include faculty from at least 2 departments, at least 1 graduate student, and at least 1 undergraduate. So trying to think about rank, discipline, field, and getting people to engage in themed projects outside of their field. I should say at this point that since COVID, we've had very few applications in that competition. There used to be maybe 4 or 5 at least each year. This year we only got 1. Last year I think there were 2. And part of that problem is being a large state school. We're the flagship University of Kansas, but large budget cuts that have been happening for several years now. So in the English department, when I came in, there were over 40 tenure track and professors, and now we're down to 25, but we still have to run the department in the same way. So everyone is really overburdened with service and just trying to make the thing go. And so folks don't have as much time to kind of sit and think about like, who can I work with? How can I think about a project that is really going to be large and encompassing? And we're not always encouraged, I think, in terms of the value that's given to collaboration. Someone said it very well earlier, that we are set up, the education is set up as competition, right? And universities still privilege the monograph. And so in a semester when I co-taught with another faculty member, I co-taught with someone from the law school, it took twice as much time to figure out how we were going to arrange things and to set up each class. It was terrific. We had capstone English majors and law students, and I was proud that the English majors did much better than the law school grads. And in terms of their flexibility of thinking, their ability to articulate different ideas and grasp certain subjects. But we were required to get twice as many students so that we could both get credit for teaching a full class. And then on top of that, we don't get any additional credit for that kind of teaching when if folks are going up for tenure or are going up for promotion. So how to negotiate that in the college university system and what projects are valued, I think is something that needs to be tackled. And what else? We have at the Hall Center, we run interdisciplinary research seminars, and I think those are great for bringing folks together. So those seminars, usually each one runs about once a month. We host them, faculty come together from different disciplines. And so it might be folks, I'm just trying to think. So for example, there is one on medieval and early modern studies. And there are faculty and graduate students in that seminar from English, from history, from Spanish and Portuguese, from French, and from art history coming together. Each time someone talks about their work in progress, and they have a small budget, about $1,000 to host up to 2 scholars from outside outside a year. So for folks to either Zoom in or come in person to speak to the seminar about what they're working on. So trying to encourage kind of exchanges across campuses as well as on campus. We have begun several years ago, the Applied Humanities Boot Camp and Summer Fellowships. So encouraging graduate students in the humanities who have previously been thinking only about academic careers to come in and think about how they can pitch their skills and think about their skills and strategies to apply to different circumstances. So how they could work really well in kind of in a non-for-profit organization like museums or different art galleries, nonprofits, things like that. Again, I think in the past, the Hall Center has been really focused on interdisciplinary work within the humanities. And one of the things that I want to try, I've just started. I've just finished my first year as permanent director. I've been at the helm for 3 years now. This is my third year. Is to think about interdisciplinarity outside of the humanities, right? So how do we think about ethics with folks in the business school? How do we think about digital humanities and computational humanities? And how do we think about medical humanities, different things like this to really reach across to STEM and other professional schools? And then in terms of dissemination, we have a traditional speakers series where we bring in visiting speakers, kind of the big name speakers, but we do more and more in terms of the public humanities to try to sell the public on the value of the humanities and the kind of rich conversations that the humanities bring to everyday people in everyday situations. And so one of the events we're holding it now every other year, is Haunting Humanities. It's kind of like a science fair for the humanities with a spooky twist. So we hold it at Halloween time, and we have different students, undergraduates, graduate students, and faculty who are working on a project that has some kind of scary or spooky or costumey kind of element to present their work to the general public. We buy tons of candy, we decorate a big event space, and everyone gets a booth to talk about their work. So that is great. I think it's great practice for folks to start talking, kind of articulating why their research is exciting, how it's exciting, not just for them or people in their fields, but to the larger public and to folks of different ages. So from teenagers to seniors, whatever it might be. It's an all ages festival. And we also have started something called the Mini Wheat State Tour in the same vein. So the University of Kansas used to have a Wheat State Tour, which was for incoming faculty, new faculty. They used to take them for a week on a bus to the four corners of the state of Kansas. People can't go for a week anymore in the ways that they used to be able to. But so a couple of years ago, I started a program that's just an overnight, and we went out to rural Kansas. So we went to Wilson, Kansas, which has anyone seen Paper Moon, the movie Paper Moon? It was filmed at this little hotel in Wilson, Kansas. So we went to this rural town, and then we went out to Nicodemus, Kansas, which is the last remaining settlement by all Black settlement since the late 1800s. And I think there are only like 6 residents remaining, but it's a historical site. Lots of folks have talked about hearing about Nicodemus, but never going. So we invited faculty from all over the university to go with us. And it was great for faculty to be able to go on this trip to see parts of the state their students come from, but they have never visited. KU is known as this, it's so founding by abolitionists. And so the heart of the Free State, John Brown is very popular. We have the John Brown Underground Bar Paul knows about John Brown Beer, the Free State Brewery. There are all of these kind of free state sites. But if you go an hour west, and it's more rural, people think of KU as an elitist kind of bastion of people wearing the jackets with the leather elbow patches and being in archives and never talking to anyone. So the fact that we went out into these rural areas and talked to ordinary people, I had someone say to me, "Oh my gosh, you're actually nice." But they didn't think that I, as a professor, would ever talk to them or could talk to them about ordinary subjects, and that I was doing work on vampires. Like, this was kind of beyond their kind of understanding of who I was as someone who works at KU. So it was really good. And all of the faculty who went, again, had to practice, how do I share what I do with people who might not have gone to college, who might be sending their students to college. But with this turn that we've had towards the anti-intellectual and anti-university, I think these kind of forms of outreach are really important. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And I will, try to skip over all the parts that are repeated. And I wanted to emphasize some things that I heard, which were about space, staff, and support and time, money, and community. And I think that they go across, and trying to build those really intentionally is important. I'll talk about how we did that with not much of any of the three. And so really trying to build on community. We still have no space. We have very little support in any, we have no regular operating budget, for instance. So I think I'm operating from a different model in many ways. So the UT Humanities Institute, running with like half a staff member, was a super traditional humanities institute. It held, it's one big event, a speaker series per year. It tried to start some stuff, but couldn't quite sustain all of it because we weren't staffed for it. And it did not have a research mission. It had sort of a vaguely public humanities writ, let's call it, right? So when I took over 3 years ago, the writ was to change our mission from these one-off events to creating a research institute. And so, like other people have shared their three things, right, including the folks who are trying to start one here, I decided that we needed, a mission statement, because no one is above like basic psychological tricks like that. And I just want to say that they're really helpful. So we help to develop humanities research. So that means you have to get in on the ground, right, with helping to develop it. We help to fund and find funding for humanities research. We have no money. What I will tell you we do that no one else does is whatever your OVPR, your group that does funding, does. We run all of the humanities grants in the department, not just the collaborative ones, not ones where we're running stuff, but literally one of my 2 staff members is dedicated to doing post-award on every humanities and arts, because of course our College of Fine Arts does not have anyone to do this, every humanities and arts grants on campus. You won't believe how much people need post-award support, but then you really need to staff it, is what I will tell you. And then we help to see humanities research through to completion. And that's the way we get at this kind of making sure, you called it the protected humanities space, making sure that there is a space that is protected for the traditional outcomes that many of us need to have to get tenure, promotion, et cetera, that gets rewarded, even as we try to change it through collaborative research, right? So our goals for research in the humanities were to, you've heard this already, right? Busting the solo researcher myth in the humanities, right? everything we do is about trying to bring students into research, graduate students, multidisciplinary teams, but also multi-generational teams, as you were talking about with the applications that are not coming in as much anymore. It's very hard, right, for people to think outside the box when they're overburdened. They don't have space, they don't have support. Doing interdisciplinary research across the humanities arts, but also partnering with all the schools and sectors of the university. One of the things I learned about that, which you all are already doing, and I have a shorthand here for how we did that in various forms, was that you needed to be really intentional. So PT 2050 is our Planet Texas 2050. It was about climate change. Then we haven't been allowed to say climate change for a very long time in Texas. So now it's about resilience. Just if you need tools and tricks, Texas is a pioneer. We will teach you how to do it. So resilience is we partnered with them to create a humanities team, because guess what? We're cheap. Everybody else there was doing engineering, right? And we were a cheap team, even when they gave everyone one course release on our arts and humanities team to create this. And then they did partner, but they partnered with each other first, because one of the things that we found in trying to build partnerships was that the humanists and the artists were being kind of brought in as a sideline and weren't sort of central to what was going on. So we let them kind of incubate ideas first and then sort of ask for matchmake and do scientific work from there, right? So we let the humanists kind of lead. We have FSRP, which is faculty student research partnerships, which are more like RAs, which we aren't even used to having, but we needed a mechanism. What we realized is that even if people did have research funds, which most of us do not get any regular research funds at Texas, I know I can tell you all kinds of things, right? It was when I got there 6 years ago, I was like, what? How does this work? We needed a mechanism to build it so that people would work with students, right? We're getting 70 and 80 applications for one little tiny research project to get, $250 to $500 at the end of the term for working on it. That's how hungry our students are at a giant state research university to get any kind of research experience. That's how much they want it. I just want to say again, that's how much they want it. Like, if you build tiny ways, they will show up. We do digital humanities. We started the intersectional humanities intersectional humanities initiative under my reign. That sounds awful, right? Reign. I don't run it. I hired somebody else to run it. They gave me money, like I was going to run my own initiative and run this. What? No, like, give jobs to other people too, is what I can tell you. Let other people run things. Teaching and community tools are part of what we give. And then second book and article workshops, which I'm going to leave for my friend here at the end to talk about article workshops and book workshops. Then really hitting undergrad research, right? We know that it's a priority for a lot of institutions right now. So trying to use that kind of administrative speak and pivot toward that. Also, to legitimately close the gap with how science students are getting a whole lot of research, which is professional experience, before they go out in the world. And we're not doing that, right? It's not baked in. So my whole shtick was, I want research. Undergrad research needs to be on every 4 or 5 or 6, however long it takes you, your agenda for our students, right? Figuring out how to do that in low stakes ways that aren't just the thesis project, that aren't just a final cumulative research experience. I'm preaching to the choir here. You all are already, at least what I get to see, which might be the folks who are already doing it, you're doing these integrated models, right? With your humanities students and across experiences. And so, right, we did that through network matching. One of the things we found was there was no way for people to find resources, right? So when we set up the faculty student research partnership, I had an econ professor, and econ is in the College of Liberal Arts, but like the guy had tons of money. He just didn't know how to find a student who could speak French to look at his archives, right? What we realized people needed was a lot of like bespoke matching. Now, we don't have the staff to even run what we have, right? Let alone that. So we just created a network where people, a listserv where people could email, hey, I need this. And students could sign up for it, grads and undergrads, right? What I would love to do is do bespoke matching, right? Is have someone where that's part of their job is to say, oh, you need this? That's great. I'll find you this. It's not where we're at yet, right? But that's what I found that researchers needed on sort of both ends, right? Giving everyone opportunities to develop professional skills through humanities research. You've heard about this already. You've already got great people doing research. Where's my friend in the back, right, about this, that these are skills. These are professional skills. We have to name them like that. When we create positions, like we have lots of work study, but also graduate student workers. But even when we do our faculty student research partnership, we give them titles, right? We make sure that the titles fit with a set of professional skills that they're working on. And then understanding the core needs and visions of others who are different. Everyone's been talking about this. Our biggest issue in trying to get collaborative research across disciplines together is that we don't have money. So we can't bring scientists in with the kind of funding that they're used to. So we have to find other common ground, right? Community partnerships are often a language. I was talking about this with Jennifer, right? Like community partnerships, things we all care about, right? A problem we all care about. This is the grand challenges thing, is the way to bring people to the table. I mean, I've just been taking notes about how everyone's been doing that across the way. So then what a Humanities Institute can provide, even on a low budget, structure for teams. What I found is that people just want like rules and structure. Anyone who's a parent in the room knows that, like, again, basic stuff kind of works, right? So trying to create structure, right, for teams was something that we worked on. How can we create a model that if a group is trying to get off the ground, right, we can structure their meetings and structure their thinking to push them towards certain outcomes, right? Introduction to various research skills, right? And direction to training in those skills. So you don't know how to do GIS, but you've got an idea for this cool mapping project. I could hook you up with the librarians who do have those skills. I can also hook you up with students who have those skills or can gain those skills for you to work on that project, right? Even if I don't have the money and the people to train you, right? In my institute, translation of humanities skills to multiple professional contexts. Again, I will point to my friend up there who was already talking about that. We need to do that work so that everyone's going home over Thanksgiving and being like, you know, T.O. John, I swear I'm going to make money, right? We need to be doing that, right? Proactively. And then community and accountability for humanities researchers. So we just started hosting writing hours that we have like a tiny conference room that's not even in our building. We just like put a Keurig in there and started hosting Zoom and in-person community writing hours. We can't do much more than that, but right now, but it was some kind of community, and we've created things like that. So then bottlenecks, right, for big state and STEM focused institutions. One system doesn't fit all. You've been hearing this. Different institutions need different things. The dream of a humanities center is great, but what is it going to look like in the institution you're actually at, and how are you going to get funding, right? I inherited something that had no system, and I'm trying to build one from there that makes sense with what we have and what we don't have. And it can make cross-disciplinary collaboration hard. We heard that maybe that's a little bit easier here at Tech, but some people would say no, right? Some people would say yes, but working on that, finding that parallel set of goals, right? Figuring out what the common ground is. Biggest thing with all institutional stuff, change is hard, right? How do you have ideas but make them sustainable? Make sure that they're staffed and supported in a sustainable way. is one of the hardest things, but then also how do you drive people to do something different than what they've already done has been the hardest baby step. We've got to start from here thing. We build all kinds of stuff, right? We started the AI Science and Culture program, and our wonderful, wonderful director, AD of that, was like, we'll have a competition. I said, it was to work collaboratively across disciplines and schools. I said, you're not going to have a competition. You're going to have to go out and find people. And that's what we had to do, right? Like it's this dream that you have to, it's hard. And then you have to meet researchers where they're at, especially sometimes us humanists, right? English professor. And you could start with early career researchers and the willing, right? And build out is what I have found. But you have to start real small, like with these like little seed grants to use new digital tools that say we will like pay you to go train on how to make this a digital project and like this little thing. We found out that we really needed to start from there. So those are my tips, right? I would love to see more cohort and team research. You're on that. More faculty student research partnerships. Everybody's on that. More research matching. I really think we should come up with a better system for that together. Let's talk about it. And more ways to train and gain skills in humanistic methods at all levels, right? To do this translation, right? To make sure that we're treating our students like the STEM students in the sense that they get so much experience, but also treating our faculty like they have transferable skills because they do. Okay, great.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. Even being the last on the this distinguished panel, hopefully I'll have at least a couple of new things to say, although I'm a little doubtful. Well, I guess actually having said that, my first slide is definitely original. No one has said this before. Let me tell you a little bit about Virginia Tech, which is my institutional context. And the slide didn't make it all the way onto the screen there. We've been through about 5 different names in our history. I just wanted to give you a sense of what those names were. The most recent name is Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. So we're not exactly the equivalent of Georgia Tech. We're not the Virginia Institute of Technology, but technology and engineering have become increasingly important to the mission over the years. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see just some keywords I picked out, which have been very important to Virginia Tech's identity and sense of itself over the 150 years it's been in existence. So you'll notice technology is on there. You'll notice humanities is not. But when I look at this list of keywords, I see in each one of them the potential for connections with what humanities faculty and students are doing. The other thing about Virginia Tech, we also have an amazing mascot, and I always like to lean into the distinctive identity of the institution. I've really enjoyed today's conversations, and even the guidance we were provided in advance emphasized connections and community. So I want to start there. I want to start thinking about how you create community among humanities people at the university, but also, of course, between humanities people and non-humanities people. I was at a talk recently about honors colleges, and the speaker posed the question, do you want your honors college to be a beacon or a fortress? And it was a rhetorical question. Nobody wants their honors college to be a fortress. They want it to be a beacon. And I kind of stored that away in my mind as something that maybe would be useful to say about humanities centers one day. So I was thinking about that and actually concluded more recently that maybe you do want a little bit of a fortress, especially in STEM-oriented institutions where sometimes humanities faculty and students can feel marginalized and sidelined. So I think there is something to be said, even though you obviously want an open community, there's also something to be said, I think, for creating a space, a kind of refuge, I've come to think of it, for humanities-minded people to come and be in community together. So we've talked already about techniques for bringing people into community, and just at a general level, I always think of the 4 killer ingredients as being space, people, ideas, and food. And so you start with a room of one's own, and Virginia Woolf in the original formulation thought financial independence, money was an important part of a room of one's own. But you start with a space, a little bit of money, you bring in interesting people, compelling ideas, good food, and I think you're well on your way to creating a community around the humanities. And from what I've seen today, you all are already well on your way to doing that, so that's really encouraging. There's also the question, though, again, it's been touched on, of connections between humanities scholars and STEM scholars or in disciplines outside STEM as well. So how do you facilitate those kinds of connections? It's not easy. One of the things I think you can do is to make the Humanities Center, or you've talked about lab or some other kind of organization, even if it's just a person or a group of people, you make them well known on campus as the place to come for people who are seeking collaborators. You want to be the person or the people, the group, the organization who knows what people are working on. So if someone comes to you looking for a collaborator, you can point them in the right direction. We've also heard the wonderful example from MIT of the funding program that brings collaborators, that incentivizes that kind of collaboration. Other ideas include social events, networking events that bring together people affiliated with the Humanities Center on one side, and then other organizations around campus. On my campus, there's a Center for Human-Computer Interaction, and we already do lots of collaboration with members of that center, but it's just one example of bringing people together with different disciplinary backgrounds and just let the magic happen. And I think we should enter those collaborations, by the way, with great confidence, because people need us to collaborate with them. They do need humanities perspectives on various kinds of projects. And in my experience, people in other parts of the university are very often highly interested in the humanities. Maybe it's too much to say that every single human is interested in the humanities. I like to think so, but certainly there's a great deal of interest. I found that I've benefited from working in Civil War history, for example, which a lot of my colleagues in computer science, visual arts, just have an interest, a curiosity about. There are also special opportunities, I think, at this historical juncture and at places like Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech as well, to leverage the particular relationship or potential relationship between humanities and technology. And Virginia Tech over the years has really leaned into this. I think some of the stuff I'm talking about predates me. My reign is very young. I've only been in post for several months. But over the last few years, various colleagues have used this phrase, tech for humanity, to describe that possibility. And it's actually come to mean different things at Virginia Tech. There's a minor in tech for humanity. There's a student research lab. And there have also been several symposia, summits, events where we've brought people together to talk about humanities perspectives on technology, AI, that kind of thing. Our Center for Humanities is also home to the Institute for Leadership in Technology, which was founded by my colleague Rishi Jaitley. And I think the easiest way to explain this is to say that it's kind of like an executive MBA, only with humanities content. So we recruit mid-career professionals, mostly from the tech industry, companies like Amazon, TikTok, and so on. And they do 3 short residencies over the course of a year. They take online classes, which, by the way, look just like traditional humanities classes. They read mostly old texts, they write essays, they get together and discuss, and then at the end of the year, they get their certification. One final big point is that I think that we all have a responsibility to advocate for the humanities in one way or another, especially against, especially in situations where STEM gets a lot of the attention. And often over the years, my approach to this has been show, don't tell. kind of like with the lightning rounds this morning, showcase the value, the interest, the importance of what humanities researchers and teachers are doing, and let that work speak for itself. But there are also occasions, of course, when we need to tell as well as show. We need to more deliberately broadcast and document the impact of humanities research and education. And I think right now is one of those times, particularly this week, today. I'm probably not the only one who's been scrambling to write op-eds about the impending threats to the NEH and trying to deal with cancelled grants and that kind of thing. So right now, I think more than ever, we've got an obligation and a responsibility to do this work. So one of my priorities over the next couple of years with the Humanities Center is going to be to treat this as a research project and gather, analyze, and disseminate data about the real impact of the humanities at Virginia Tech. And of course, that's going to have implications for other institutions. And we've been pitching this project as having implications for the society as a whole, increasingly tech or STEM oriented. And we're going to be doing this work along a variety of fronts. When I put this slide together, I was still very hopeful that one of those fronts would be this NEH grant, applications for which are due in on April 16th. And it still looks as though it's going to be available to apply for, but who knows. But regardless of what happens with this new NEH grant scheme, one way or another, we're going to be gathering and providing data about the value of the humanities, its long-lasting, its wide-ranging value. In terms of, workplace success is always a tempting one to emphasize because that's where the conversation is, and I think it's very important. But also, we're interested in researching how the humanities influence things like responsible citizenship, human flourishing or happiness, and all of these kinds of things as well. And I think if we can gather real data and share it with the right audiences, we're going to set ourselves up for success as advocates of the humanities, not only in STEM-oriented institutions, but also in what feels like a STEM-oriented world as well. I'll be glad to chat, by the way. I didn't go into as much detail about the specific programs, the specific ways in which we support faculty, research and teaching, and outreach for that matter. But I would be delighted to answer questions about those later, whether in the Q&A or informally later. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. I am going to actually leave the microphone with you. Works? Yes.
Hi. I actually had two questions, but I think I'll only ask one so I don't take up the short time. But I do have a second question for the directors of the centers that I'll try to ask you guys later. But for the two deans, I'm currently the director of undergrad studies for our department, the literature, media, and communication. And I, along with my colleague Allegra, have been working on establishing certificates for our undergraduate majors. For us, it's been really eye-opening. First of all, just the amount of interest that our majors have in certificates, and any kind of micro-credentials that they can use. For us, it's been really interesting seeing and kind of experimenting with how we would organize and title certificates so that they effectively advertise what we do to the employment world. So, we've noticed actually kind of surprisingly, there's like huge corporate interest in certificates with like the word ethics in the title and things like that. Communications, also a big hit, as Allegra is pointing out. I guess I'm interested from the two deans. Do you have particular policies or recent histories with certificates in your colleges? Is this something you're trying to expand? Have there been drawbacks with certificates? Do you find they conflict with other things? Are there pluses and minuses, I guess, in certificates, both just as opportunities for majors, but also, again, as a way to kind of advertise what the humanities has to offer?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Great question. This topic has been not on the front burner, but in people's minds and discussing for a decade at least. Badges, all kinds of micro credentials have come and gone, and nothing's really taken. And I think the problem, it's like Betamax VHS. There's no standard that's emerged that sort of the employment world has recognized as, oh, this is the certificate. On the other hand, right, if you're MIT or Carnegie Mellon or all these great universities, right, the world outside recognizes that you have something serious to contribute. So what we've done is we've tried to put some guidelines around what the certificate has to be minimally. It's usually about 3 courses, right? And what it sort of has to be in terms of the credential on your transcript or not. So the students, right, absolutely love, as you say, the credential. And what we found is if you can make the credential serious so that it's not just something they can wave and say, look at me, then the departments that actually are involved in it, right, are very, very, they're benefiting a lot. The registrar hates us completely for getting this, but I think this is the way the world's going. So I talked about the certificate we have in ethics and AI in the PhD level, right? The certificates now on the master's level, the certificates that prep you for a master's program in data science are 3-course certificates. So I think this is the way the world's going. And in fact, if you really have to look ahead, in my view, we know enough about sort of how to assess learning outcomes, right, on an ongoing, anytime, real-time basis, that instead of even just having a course or a micro-credential or even less, we could do something much more fine-grained than even a mini course, right, and say, I can give you, right, 500 different skills or pieces of knowledge that I think you possess when you graduate from college, as opposed to you've taken 40 courses and you have 4 certificates or something like that. So I think this is the way the world's going, and I think we have a long way to go before we can get agreement on how we credential, because we all have the middle states or the southern states or whatever it is to go through the accreditation process so we can give the credential of the degree. Right, but we have nothing similar for certificates, but it needs to happen.
So at MIT, not only do we not do it, but I've never heard it discussed. And that is in spite of the fact that I agree, it is a great idea. So I'm wondering why. So I wonder whether part of it is that some of the things you talked about are just required of every student. So every student has to satisfy a communications requirement, and every study needs a concentration in humanities, arts, or social sciences. So it could be that some of those things are taken care of. Another thing that I can report is that our students talk about pressures from potential employers as going in the exact opposite direction. So the word on the street is that when a big tech company is recruiting and interviewing, that the main thing they want to know is how many computer science classes did you take. So I don't know if it's a different environment, but I at least the students are not reporting an interest in having that. But I'm going to think about this more. I think it's a great idea.
Well, I have 2 questions. One kind of philosophical for the experts panel, and another very practical for the funders. and I will try to be very brief. So my philosophical question starts where Dean Richard Shanes sort of ended his previous remark, that there is a profound lack of narrative. And it doesn't concern only us, the humanities. We are living in the age of the profound lack of important ideological narrative. The French, as usual, they noticed this problem way before we did. They started talking about what they call silence of intellectuals back in the 1990s. And, you know, they continue sort of struggling this problem, unresolving it. We live in the interesting period where they have all those concepts like neo-concepts, neoliberalism, neo-fascism, you name it. They have also post-concepts, postmodernism and post-communism. And once again, you can continue without me wasting your time. So my question to you is whether, and to everyone, I guess, whether we are at this point in the humanities thinking, then they should really concentrate on this question of why they arrived at the silence of intellectuals, why they're using those kind of second-hand, outdated concepts, trying to pull them on the new realities we understand little of, and maybe we should just focus on it. So that's a kind of broad philosophical questions. The deficit of narratives or silence of intellectuals, how should we tackle it? And my much more practical and short question is to the funders. I'm from St. Petersburg. I lived in the Soviet Union. And Radio Liberty and Voice of America were two radio stations which were our air. We read it. We just couldn't live. We wouldn't survive without it. So my question to the funders is, do you know of any attempts to fund those radio stations which are defunded already by the current government? Thank you.
So here's the thing. Again, I'm at the state that pioneered anti-DEI here, right? We dismantled early and voluntarily. I am but I'm also at this like elite research institution that's the same space. And then I look at our students, and our students are, while it lasts, we still have this now 6%. It used to be 10% of the if you're in the top 10%, now it's again 6% because of numbers of your high school class you get in. Our legacy students and our white and wealthy students in the state already go elsewhere because they have the money to go outside of the state. So when I look at who our actual students are first-gen students, often for not just first-gen to college, but often first-gen in the US. They make up the bulk of our classes, right? So again, I teach this 1,100 person gen ed, and if you look out, it's not a sea of white faces, right, or white male faces. And so I pause to say this to say, I think we're in, yes, a crisis mode about what universities are and what they're going to be, and whether we will just be a credentialing system that's not about ethics, but is about a set of skills, and whether we could even play that game. I think we're going to be in a place where students are scared to major in the humanities and scared to major in or certificate in ethnic studies in particular, and women's and gender studies, and anything that has justice in it, in as much as we will also have students who are incredibly, even more energized to do so as long as we exist, which we might not as faculty soon in those fields in my state and at my institution. We're still going to have students, because as much as there's this backlash and this absolutely insane focus on dismantling higher ed at this moment by this administration, we have a group of students who this is their option, right? In my state, right? This is their cheap elite option, and they're going to take it. And I think the question is not because we're such good people or we're so virtuous, but how will we exist for that population who is still coming? And again, I can only speak to my local circumstance, but that's what I'm thinking of, is that we're still going to exist because they exist and they need us. I mean, the SEC bros need us too. So we might wind up switching just to that because our applications are way up because we joined a different athletic conference too, right? So who knows what that will look like, but I know where we're at now, and that's what I'm thinking of.
So the question you asked triggers me to go in a slightly different direction, but I think it's relevant. So when we had the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel last year, there was an awful lot of passion, heat, really difficult energy to manage on campus. And as deans, the academic freedom of speech thing really comes home at that moment. What I think I noticed and many other people noticed was people felt, for a variety of reasons, very silenced, because if they would take one position or the other side would be all over them and shame them and put them as either, heartless terrorists or heartless Zionists who are going to commit genocide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what we tried to do, because it was just terrifying to kind of manage it, was lean into a whole different strategy, which was let's encourage civil discourse and educating people on the history of the conflict in a way that was informing them as opposed to advocating one way or the other. And what we realized really quite quickly was the students and even the faculty have no experience in how to have productive, respectful, civil dialogue about difficult topics, whether it's Israel-Palestine, whether it's abortion, whether it's transgender rights, it doesn't matter. So I mean, those things are really complicated, and speaking as an intellectual representing your institution is very loaded and very fraught. And I think everybody's become scared, and especially in the world today. Right? This is now very, very scary. But I think that as a humanities who studies discourse and understands, right, that we don't deal with questions that have answers in the back of the book like the engineers. We deal with questions that are very, very difficult and allow multiple perspectives, that we really should lean into encouraging and teaching students and faculty how to have civil discourse and be respectful of alternative viewpoints in a way that's actually going to move the conversation forward and be productive. And I think we've also gotten a bad rep, I think, in the general public that's not in institutional settings or in liberal cities, because we're not looked at as tolerant of a diversity of opinions. And I think so that's the progress I think maybe relates a little bit to what you are pointing to, that would alleviate some of the silence of the intellectuals if they felt like they could actually speak and not get shouted down and be vilified for taking one position or the other. I mean, this is a dialogue we have to have.
When you were saying that, I think that's definitely true. There are a couple of folks on my campus who we just put in a Mellon grant for thinking about academic freedom and democracy on college campuses and on a Midwest campus specifically. And there are a set of people who are saying, civics is no longer taught, this idea of debate. And so, yes, exactly as you're saying, people don't know how to have these difficult conversations. And I think these conversations are often what happen in humanities classrooms. But then I also started thinking about a graduate student I was talking to, and I was like, I find it to be really hard with some of my undergraduates that when someone says something that they are opposed to, that then they're saying, okay, I don't want to be in a group with that person anymore, and I cannot agree with those ideas. This person is out of line, and this is offensive. And I said, yes. And I said, I was just talking to my daughter and saying, if you cut off everyone, if you keep blocking people on your social media, eventually you'll cut everybody off. Like, how do you talk through opposing opinions? And this graduate student looked at me and said, I never thought of that. And I was like, whoa. But like, we're at a very different cultural point. And so I'm really curious about, like, I'm really looking forward to, like, hoping that we get this grant, but to having these conversations. How do we combat that tendency of people to have the option of blocking, right? Like, we didn't have that option when I was growing up, like, to block someone. If you got in a fight with them, you had to figure out, okay, I'm going to see them all the time. Are you going to reroute? I remember doing that, like rerouting my walk to school so that I didn't have to see this particular person. But, how do you get beyond difficult situations? But I also wanted to comment on your point about first generation students to college, and I do find that in our public K through 12 schools, I'm also seeing a much higher number of schools who are moving to a tracking model. So are very much about emphasizing skills and kind of pathways in the high schools, especially. So do you want to be on a pre-med path? Do you want to be on a pre-law path? Do you want to be on a VOTEC path? And so those students are not having to take humanities classes, or they're getting permission to pass out of them. So take the AP class so you don't have to take writing when you get to college, right? You can pass out of that. And how this is where students often, or take AP history so you don't have to take a history requirement in college. But this is where students often get their excitement about the humanities when they get to college, and they have these classes where they get to take things and have conversations that they couldn't have in high school. So I want to get rid of AP classes, but not seriously, but like the ways that our educational system is being structured at the K through 12 level. And a lot of my first generation American students, I taught a class in medical humanities, and that was the most diverse class I've had in over 25 years of teaching at KU. And it was because most of those students, the students who were first generation in the US, or their parents were first generation. There were students they were first generation in college, races, ethnicities, religions, all of these ways that they were incredibly diverse. But they said they were all pre-med, they were almost all pre-med. And they were like, we love to read, but we can't take any literature classes and any humanities classes because that is going to make our applications look weaker next to the other people who are applying to medical school. And my parents really suffered to get to this country, and I need to have a career that's really successful, and I need to make money, and humanities is not it. And I'm like, humanities is it. You can do this, but they don't have those narratives. So again, that question about, like, how do we change the narrative? We have to change it way before those students get to college. They've already decided in high school, and then they're not taking our classes to get involved in the conversations where we can give them other narratives.
Much more to say and many more questions that we didn't get to. So I apologize for that, but thank you so much for this amazing panel.